Hardwired to Self-Destruct, Metallica's first album in 8 very long years. In homage to that, we're going to be looking at the 10 best Metallica albums of all time. Santanga was released in June 2003 and gets a score of 65 out of 100 on Metacritic. It was released to a combination of mixed and positive reviews. Adrian Begrand of Pop Matters took both sides, saying, "While it's an ungodly mess at times, what you hear on this album is a band playing with passion for the first time in years." Producer Bob Rock said that it was intended to sound like a band jamming together in the garage for the first time, and the band just happens to be Metallica. Talking about the album, Greg Cott of Blender said, "It may be too late to rehabilitate Metallica's image, but once again, the music is all about bringing the carnage." The seventh album by Metallica, Reload, was released in 1997, with AllMusic Stephen Thomas Erlewine thinking the record was worthwhile and noting that it was heavily influenced by Southern rock. He didn't approve the idea of doing a sequel to The Unforgiven 2, but praised the collaboration with Marianne Faithfull on The Memory Remains. Dan Sneerson from Entertainment Weekly said Reload continues Metallica's journey to strip down maturity while toying with fresh melodic textures, and also forsakes some of the punchy hooks and gut-clenching heft that elevated recent Metallica CDs. Rolling Stone's Lorraine Alley opined the album was rooted in heavy metal, despite some songs being influenced by bluesy rock and roll. She said Reload was not Metallica's best, but named it as a stepping stone in Metallica's legacy. On the other hand, musicians described the album as greasy, driving, full of fat grooves, lyric and rhythmic hooks, and sonic curveballs. The magazine felt it captures one of rock's greatest bands at its peak. Garage Inc. is a cover compilation album released on November the 23rd, 1998. It is a combination of Garage Days Revisited and this song Damage Inc. That's where the title comes from Master of Puppets. And the album's artwork draws heavily from the 1987 EP. The album features songs by artists that have influenced Metallica, including many bands from the new wave of British heavy metal movement, hardcore punk bands, and popular songs. The reception from the Rolling Stones said they gave it 4 out of 5. They said, "Gloriously hard as the album is, you can't miss Metallica's good-natured side coming through." Entertainment Weekly said, "We'll have to wait until Metallica's next proper album to find out if this trip to the garage recharges their batteries." Still, all things considered, Garage Inc. is an intermittently exhilarating joyride. And CMG said, "Those who still relate to the adolescent angst of Metallica's earliest days will find plenty to like on Garage Inc." Load is Metallica's sixth album and was released in June 1996. It was released to a combination of positive and mixed reviews, with Rolling Stone saying, "With Load, the foursome dams the bombast and chugs half speed ahead, settling into a wholly magnetising groove that bridges old school biker rock and the doomier side of post-grunge 90s rock." Q said, "These boys set up their tent in the darkest place of all, in the naked horror of their own heads. Metallica make existential metal and they've never needed the props. Metallica are still awesome. What is new is streamlined attack, the focus, and yes, the tunes." Melody Baker had reservations about the heaviness compared to prior Metallica albums, saying, "A Metallica album is traditionally an exhausting event. It should rock you to exhaustion, leave you brutalised and drained. This one is no exception. It is, however, the first Metallica album to make me wonder at any point, what the fuck was that? It's as if the jackpot grinding in the human face were to take occasional breaks for a pedicure." All Music considered Load to be an unsurprisingly repetitive, uninteresting, and poorly executed album. Death Magnetic is the ninth album released by Metallica and was released in 2008. It's been praised by fans as well as critics as a comeback for Metallica. Thrash Hits was one of the first websites, along with Quietus, to comment on Death Magnetic, claiming it is a vast improvement on St. Anger. Metal Hammer noted Death Magnetic's sharp riffs and uncharacteristic bouncing grooves, and favourably compared the band's sound on the album to bands like Slayer, Led Zeppelin, and Rage Against the Machine. Former Dream Theater drummer Mike Portnoy has praised the album, saying, "Death Magnetic is hands down the best Metallica album in 20 years. This is the CD I've been waiting for them to make since And Justice for All. And thumbs up to them for doing the first real Metallica instrumental in 20 years since To Live Is To Die. Welcome back, boys." Metallica, commonly known as the Black Album, is the fifth album by Metallica, released in 1991, and it was released to widespread acclaim from both heavy metal journalists and mainstream publications, including NME, the New York Times, and The Village Voice. In Entertainment Weekly, David Brown called it rock's preeminent speed metal cyclone and said Metallica may have invented a new genre, progressive thrash. Q Magazine's Mark Cooper said he found the album's avoidance of metal's typically clumsy metaphors and glossy production refreshing. He said Metallica managed to rekindle the kind of intensity that fired the likes of Black Sabbath before metal fell in love with its own cliches. Select Magazine's David Kavanagh believed the album lacks artifice and is disarmingly genuine. In his review for Spin, Alec Froeg found the music's harmonies vividly reformed and said that Metallica showcased their newfound versatility on such songs as The Unforgiven and Holier Than Thou. Robert Palmer, writing in Rolling Stone, said that several songs sounded like hard rock classics, and that, apart from Don't Tread on Me, Metallica is an exemplary album of mature but still kicks-ass rock and roll. In his guide to Metallica's albums up to that point, Greg Cott of the Chicago Tribune recommended the album as a great place for Metallica neophytes to start, with its more concise songs and explosive production. Whilst Jonathan Gold was less enthusiastic in the Los Angeles Times, he said, while Metallica embraced pop sensibilities quite well, there was a sense that the group was no longer in love with the possibilities of its sound, on an album whose difficulty being embraced by the metal cult mirrored Bob Dylan going electric in the mid-1960s. Kill 'Em All was Metallica's first album, released back in 1983, and received mostly positive reviews. Bernard Doe of Metal Forces described Kill 'Em All as one of the fastest and heaviest albums ever recorded, and remarked that the album is not for the faint-hearted. Greg Cott of the Chicago Tribune acknowledged it as the speed metal prototype, but felt the lyrical replication of Judas Priest and the Misfits kept the album short from becoming a classic. In a retrospective review, Billboard praised Kill 'Em All for changing the face of popular music with its unique combination of punk and metal. AllMusic Steve Huey called it the true birth of thrash. He praised Hetfield's highly technical rhythm guitar style and said that the band was playing with tightly controlled fury, even at the most ridiculously fast tempos. Rob Kemp, writing in the Rolling Stone album guide, credited the album for consolidating the punk, rock, and heavy metal scenes, but felt that, apart from Seek and Destroy and Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, most of the album had the band trying to look tough, over enthusiastic, but unfinished riff-based songs. Released on August 25th, 1988 by Elektra Records, and Justice for All was acclaimed by music critics. In a contemporary review for Rolling Stone, Michael Azerrad said that Metallica's compositions are impressive and called the album's music a marvel of precisely channeled aggression. Spin Magazine's Sharon Lifeton called it a gem of a double record and found the music both edgy and technically proficient. Simon Reynolds, writing in Melody Maker, said that other bands would give their eye teeth for the song's riffs and found the album's densely complicated style of metal to be distinct from the monotonous sound of contemporary rock music. Everything depends on utter punctuality and supreme surgical finesse. It's probably the most incisive music I've ever heard in a literal sense of the word. Burovoj Kurgin of Metal Forces said that it was the most ideal album he has heard because of typically exceptional production and musicianship that is more impressive than on Master of Puppets. Ride the Lightning, which was Metallica's second studio album, was released in 1984 and received widespread acclaim from music critics. According to Q Magazine, the album confirmed Metallica's status as the leading heavy metal band of the modern era. The magazine credited the group for redefining the norms of thrash metal, with Fade to Black the genre's first power ballad. British rock magazine Kerrang! Stated that the album's maturity and musical intelligence helped Metallica expand heavy metal's boundaries. Greg Carter of the Chicago Tribune described Ride the Lightning as a more refined extension of the group's debut. In a retrospective review, Sputnik Music's Channing Freeman named it as one of the few albums that can be charming and powerful at the same time. He praised Hetfield's vocal performance and concluded that Metallica was firing all cylinders. AllMusic's Steve Huey saw the album as a more ambitious and remarkable effort than Kill 'Em All. He called Ride the Lightning an all-time metal classic because of the band's rich musical imagination and lyrics that avoided their heavy metal cliches. And the Rolling Stone album guide viewed the album as a great step forward for the band and as an album that established the concept of Metallica's following two records. Master of Puppets was the third Metallica album released in 1986 to widespread acclaim from the music critics. Editor Tom King said that Metallica was at an incredible songwriting peak during the recording sessions, partially because Burson contributed to the songwriting. The album was hailed as a masterpiece by critics outside of the heavy metal audience, and cited by some as the genre's greatest album. In a contemporary review, Tim Holmes of Rolling Stone asserted that the band had redefined heavy metal with the technical skill and subtlety showcased on the album, which he described as the sound of global paranoia. Kerrang wrote that Master of Puppets finally put Metallica into the big leagues where they belong. By contrast, Spin Magazine's Judge I. Rankin was disappointed with the album and said that although the production is exceptional and Metallica's experimentation is commendable, it eschews the less intellectual approach of Kill 'Em All for an MDC-inspired direction that is inconsistent. So, where does Hardwired to Self-Destruct figure in the top 10 Metallica albums? Where would it be on the list? Will it come straight in to be the greatest Metallica album ever? Will it even make the top 10? What do you guys think? Leave me comments below to tell me what your favourite Metallica album is. And if you've heard the new Metallica album, tell me what you think of that as well. Thanks for watching. Take care now. And bye. And we'll catch you again later. See ya.